Welcome back once again to Red Hot Talk. And this week we're going to have a little bit of a break from what we discussed and showcased last week. And I hope for those who tuned in and watched the entire show would get a little bit of an inspiration from a great photographer, Jean Cazelle. And for those who haven't watched that show or listened to it, I would highly recommend and go back and check out his work, because I think it's definitely educational. You will definitely get some inspiration when it comes to composition, you know, how to put details into a shot, framings and all kinds of stuff. So it's a very good 2 hours talk. I know it's a bit long, but it's definitely worth your checking out. So this week we got a little bit lighthearted, hopefully, to talk a little bit about some new cameras, some new products coming out in the past week or so. The more specific, we're going to talk about two products that spring to mind, and you can probably see in the thumbnails already. One of which is the brand new Fujifilm X-E-5, and of course the OM system, brand new, freshly announced yesterday, the OM-5 Mark II. Of course, as usual, people usually tune in a little bit later, so we just have a casual talk just to start the conversation, and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty when more people are joining. So, Rod, overall, we're just talking a little bit about the values on second-hand market, right? So maybe we'll do a little bit of that talk first. I think it's quite interesting, because that leads into perhaps, you know, the main kind of content that we're trying to discuss today. So we have witnessed, perhaps we already discussed this, is that the compact point and shoot market, the value in the second-hand market has gone up significantly for the past, I don't know, 2 years, 3 years now, and it's continuing to go up. And you literally just brought us some example about some of these models that, you know, we literally bought for, I wouldn't say little money, but definitely not as much as what it's worth now, and which is kind of, you know, interesting. For instance, you know, like I actually still own the Sony RX100 series, which is a very popular series. That's why Sony has made so many versions of it, because it is a great little compact camera, very small, very capable. You got a 1-inch sensor, you got a viewfinder, you got a cow-sized lens on it, and it's a great little camera. But the one that I have is the version 5. So I paid, I remember, brand new, and it was around about 600, just over £600. And you looked out from MBB, right? How much was it now, the version 5 now?
So yours is the RX105.
Yep.
Let's have a look. Excellent condition, £889.
Wow. So it's more now. It's worth more.
You're not tempted?
No, I'm not tempted, because I like that camera.
You haven't sold yours then?
No. And I've been keeping it, you know, just because it is a very capable point and shoot camera. I wouldn't say the video is particularly good, and obviously they have improved since, and the version 5 wasn't particularly known for it, but you can shoot 4K, and but the stabilization, which is eye steady, and you can have both in the optical stabilization plus the digital stabilization, but we're talking about 10-year-old technology, so it was pretty bad.
It is. It was actually launched in 2016.
Yeah,
amazing.
so
A 9-year-old camera selling for more than it cost.
It's crazy, right? But that's not an isolated case, right? You know, and you found other cameras with the same thing.
Well, for example, we'll mention that saintly brand Fujifilm. Let's have a look. I bought my Fujifilm X-T compact, I'm gonna guess 7 years ago, for £400. It's $399. If I want to buy a used one now, it'll cost me $594.
Yep.
So that is an old camera with a small 12 megapixel sensor that doesn't shoot 4K, but it looks cool. So is this what we're seeing now, that everything that looks good, that creators like to talk about, is just bringing silly money? Yeah,
even Chuck L just mentioned that the version 7 is going for $1,200 on eBay, which is what you told me anyway.
I know. And if you think about something like the Fujifilm X Pro series,
Yep.
I guess that's dead now. But I'm just having a look at that, and if you want a version 1, you're going to have to pay something towards £500 for it.
But that's an
in
even
excellent
older
condition.
camera, right? That's what, 13
Yeah.
year old now.
That's the 16 megapixel sensor and phase detect AF, unless I've got that wrong. No, not phase detect. It might be contrast AF. I'm not quite sure, because I think Fujifilm did bring in phase detect AF with the 16 megapixel sensor, but I can't quite remember what iteration that was.
Yeah.
If you want an X Pro 2, that's a little over 1,000. If you want an X Pro 3, you're talking more like 1,400.
Which hasn't really dropped in terms of value, because it was about that
No,
price
not
when
at
it
all.
first came out.
Yeah. It's just insane. But
Yeah.
if you do want to if you want a bit of a hipster and buy things nobody else wants,
Yep.
you could get a Nikon D7100 DSLR. So it's 24 megapixels,
Yep.
APS-C, £199. Though
Yeah,
it's difficult to find one in excellent condition now, admittedly.
But
So
I
that
think
one-
overall, certain DSLR models are have dropped. It's most of the casualty because it's not in demand. Everyone's looking for the kind of cool looking camera these days, whether it's in compact form or rangefinder style form, and that's what kind
of course, yeah.
that's kind of trendy at the moment, and I can see that, and that's another thing as well, right? We briefly kind of touched based on it. I'm not sure about what everybody listening now, whether you have a similar sort of sense as well. Is now Fujifilm as a brand, I think the value has gone up. Do you agree on it? In generally, people associate Fujifilm not just about they're creating hot products, but they also, as a brand, they seem to has a higher values compared to other brands. I think it's weird to say that, but if you look at the secondary market, they all these secondhand products are either sold out, or you can't get hold of one, or they're selling more than used, more than new.
I think it's in a previous life I studied economics, and this is a very basic thing in economics, the law of supply and demand. You can't buy the damn things, so it's driven the price up and the demand. Scarcity drives demand. So either Fujifilm's played a very clever game, or they've released cameras they realise they can't make in the right numbers. Could be either of those.
It could be both. I mean, I always suspect, like in modern day manufacturing, I mean, I can't see people can't make enough cameras. Unlike your hand built, hand checked, a little bit like Leica cameras, which they are, hand assembled, hand checked, hand calibrated, by engineers one by one in the factories, and those are slow production things. But anything's running up from a factory in the production lines, I can't imagine that it will be reduced to that sort of numbers, unless you can't find the parts. When we had the chip shortage, back in a few years ago, that could be the problems. But now that problem is gone. We see production kind of back to the normal level. We see all kinds of cameras now seems to be okay. When it comes to production.
I can't quite understand why the X100 V1 is still on back order. I mean, there may be places you can get it, but take a big retailer like B&H in the States, or Wix in the UK. They haven't got any.
Well,
I think
B&H,
B&H even has a button saying "Request Assistance." It's not even.
I did read on the forums that apparently there are two places you can buy the X100 V1 or 6 version 6 at the moment. One is Amazon. Amazon sell them from Europe, so it's not actually UK stock. I believe it's Europe stock. But you can buy them for a little bit of a premium, but not extortionate. So you can get them for about £1,900 for the X100. So not over 2K now. So that price has come down a little bit. And I think that if you also on the waiting list, or not waiting list, but you should subscribe to do this notify me thing, through Selvages or Harrods. They are given priorities when it comes to stock. So if you are on that list over there, you're very likely to get it sooner than anybody else.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. Got some
So
inside
this
information there.
these are insider information from people on the forum apparently who wants to get hold of one.
I have found the X100V on Amazon, and I think it is in the official Fujifilm shop. So I think that £1,900 is always for the silver one,
Yes.
which
Yes.
I think a lot of people have been waiting for.
Yeah. The black
let's
one's slightly
see.
less.
It is, yeah. I don't quite know why, but oh, I think there may be some kind of miscommunication, and because the Fujifilm shop is only listing the X100V, not the V1. So something peculiar is going on. Let's just assume you can buy it on Amazon. There does seem to be a price premium.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it is being sold by Fujifilm or not, but it's not kind of overnight delivery by any means. It's
No,
a few days.
it's definitely shipped from Europe, and then
Right.
and it's not
right.
part of Amazon Prime, so it's not under under Amazon's own warehouses. So it is shipped from
No,
somewhere.
it's not. It's coming. It's coming from somewhere. We don't know where. I do wish Amazon was a bit clearer about who the seller is. It's not so easy to find out, is it?
They're usually sold by someone on just under the price, and they should actually see a little link to it, and then
Well, it says visit the Fujifilm store. It doesn't say sold by Fujifilm. But if you do visit the Fujifilm store, the X100V1 does not appear to be there. I'll
Yeah.
try again. Hang on.
But while you're searching for it, and then now we're on the
Yes,
subject
yeah,
of
yeah.
Fujifilm,
Yeah.
and how many of you are a little bit shocked when Fujifilm said about the price of the brand new XE5? I mean, obviously there's a huge debate online at the moment saying that the XE5 should be the mid-tier model. Just like the XE3, XE4 before it, they were all selling round about between £700 to £800. And I can't remember exactly XE4 when it first came out, what the launch price was, but before it all disappeared, the kind of street price was about £850 for XE4. You can get a body for that sort of prices. But now the brand new price for the XE5, the RRP anyway, is at least $1,550. So in the UK, in the US, is $1,600, I think, if not probably $1,800. Correct me if I'm wrong. So it's almost double the price. It's the same naming convention. People expect it to be a same camera, I mean, updated camera from the series. And why would it cost double?
Well, I can read you what Fujifilm says on its website. It's saying a modern classic can't simply mimic what has gone before, nor can it ignore what has preceded it. Not quite sure what that means, but anyway. It should respect its lineage by refining a concept without losing its essence. Fujifilm X-T5 embodies what it means to be a modern classic, combining a sophisticated, elegant design with analog controls that inspire image making, blah, blah, blah. Basically, I think they're saying, oh, we had to make it better because we owed it to the series to make it better. So I don't know. I've no idea what they're saying. But
I don't know. Yeah.
I think we all got used to the XE series being about the same price as the XT, being like the rangefinder version of the XT.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in a funny kind of way, that's still similar because the XT5 and the XE5 are similar sort of price. But then you could go back and say, how did the XT5 get to be so expensive? Because what was the XT4? XT3?
Well,
they went far behind that,
but the XE series always kind of in terms of price rise is kind of in line with the XT20, XT30 kind of that kind of bracket, and just under £1,000,
it kind of did, yeah.
So people always expect it to be like a mid tier because XT series, the XT1 or XT5, the latest generations, is supposed to be almost the flagship in the lineup, right? Obviously, you got the XH, which is another level up. But the XT is always been kind of like the pro camera, and so is the X Pro, which is X Pro supposed to be the professional range of the rangefinder style camera, not the XE. So now is the XE, the RRP of the XE5 is actually selling more than the X Pro 3 when it first came out.
I guess so. So it is slightly up, but then the X Pro 3 was out a few years ago. Got to make allowances for inflation.
So
I guess, but I think we are seeing a general escalation in camera pricing and expectation and marketing. So yeah. But personally, I'd be quite happy if you could still buy the XE3. So that's a decent little camera that wasn't very expensive. And if I could still find one at a reasonable used price, I might be tempted. But they've gone up as well. So I think the XE3 now, a good one, is probably about £1,000. So you can't win.
Imagine that.
You can't win.
So that's strange, right? Like so on that note, you can kind of expect, because rumor says that Fujifilm, it hasn't given up the X Pro series, so that means X Pro 4 potentially being in development or still in the book. So if that is the case, if we can imagine that, right? XE5 selling for 1,500 quid in the UK.
Yeah.
Imagine X Pro come out, it will be 2K minimum.
20.99 and 22.99 in a graphite or whatever they call it. I've no idea. I don't think they'll make one, but you might be right. I don't know.
But I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think? Like anyone listening right now, we're always talking about cameras getting more expensive. Everyone's complaining about even Michael Four Third cameras are getting a bit expensive. Oh, look at that. Like 1,500, 1,800 pounds, you get a full frame camera. It's correct. But look at what Fujifilm has done at the moment. Everything is basically surpassing some of the even more popular full frame camera. Because now, on street, at least street price wise, you can get a Nikon ZF, which is the camera that I really like, for about 1,700 quid. The black version, 1,700, and that is ballpark figure, as the XE5, and in terms of image quality, okay, you got less megapixel, but it's debatable. We always talk about megapixel isn't everything. And Rod, you also said that the 40 megapixel it sounds great, but a lot of the Fujifilm glass are not optimized for that sort of resolution.
Well, other people might have had different experiences, but I don't think so. Yeah, I think that's the elephant in the room for Fujifilm.
Yep.
The good lenses are too big. The affordable compact lenses aren't quite good enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think the f2 primes are okay, but if you use them on an XT5, you do see their limitations, mainly things like edge softness, which has always been a bit of a thing for Fujifilm lenses.
Yeah.
So so what you could do is you could get the premium 16 to 50 2.8 and the 8 to 16 2.8. Those are big lenses. They're the size of full frame equivalents. So you start to think, what have I gained?
That's interesting. But and another thing about prices is obviously there's no confirmation, it's purely speculations and personal opinions, is that I suspect, a lot of the price hikes in some of the newer model is also down to perhaps the tariffs that's imposed in the US. And as a company, they're trying to averaging out a little bit, so they absorb the bulk of the increase in the US and averaging out for the rest of the world, so we all get to pay a little bit of that.
So do you think if the tariffs go, the price will come down?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. Once
like,
it's up, they stay there.
It's like handbrake on a car, isn't it?
Yeah.
Once you put it up, it clicks and it won't go down again. It's ratchets.
That's pretty much it, right? I think, I don't know whether you think it's fair or not, but I rarely see things going up and come back down again. It's unlikely.
I'll tell you what I would do. I would point out to people that the XT32 Mark II is quite cheap. It's the 26 megapixel sensor. You don't get IBIS, but it's a nice little camera, and it is, by current standards, quite cheap. And it takes all the same lenses, of course.
But of course, we just talked a lot about price increases. Let's throw a spanner into the ring and say that, right, Okay, OM System seems to have done the opposite. So, the brand new OM-5 Mark II, which I have it right here in front of me. This is the new colorway. This is the new sandy beige.
Oh,
I don't know why they actually.
No, cool.
I
yeah.
actually don't know why they call it sandy beige. To me, it looks more like kind of like a khaki, sandstone color. And it's definitely not beige. Definitely not beige.
Pale biscuit.
Pale biscuit. There are a lot of nicknames. There's a lot of nickname there. And but anyway, price on this is actually £200 cheaper than the OM5. I'm talking about launch price. So the OM5 came out at $12.99. Now it's $10.99 for this new model, body only, of course. So while everything's gone up, OM System has done the opposite. They reduced the newer model by quite a margin, actually. If you think about it, $12.99 minus £200 is quite a big margin. They reduced it, and I personally think that they did well in terms of pricings. They must have done some calculations there. Whether you agree this is a good model or not, whether it's a good camera or not, whether you will buy it or not, that's another thing. But I think in terms of pricing for the model, for what it can do and capability-wise, I think they have a winner here when it comes to the figures. Because, when everyone's complaining about everything's gone up 50%, 60%, and this is now 20% less. And it's a brand new one.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a great deal of criticism about the relatively small technical changes. I can understand that, but I think it all depends on how you look at this. I think if a camera maker has a good camera, but they need to just do a couple of things to bring it up to date and keep it current, I think that's what OM System has done. I know a lot of people are looking for big technological steps, technical improvements. I think realistically, firstly, it's not going to happen, not immediately. And secondly, it may not even be necessary. So I think if you've got an OMD EM5 III or an OM5 and you're thinking, well, this one's just the same. Yes, don't buy it. The one you've got's fine. If you are a new user deciding between Sony, Panasonic, OM System, Canon, Nikon, Fujifilm, what OM System has done with the OM5 II is to make it more current and make it that little bit more appealing and keep it competitive in that quite crowded marketplace. So you can criticize it for not having big technical improvements, perfectly true, but OM System has kept it current and also made it that little bit cheaper. It's made it a much more competitive camera for people choosing which brand to go for.
Yes, I mean, essentially, it's the price of the EM5 Mark III when it first came out all those years ago. And then now, if you think about in current market, it's pretty attractive and very accessible. And you can throw in a couple of primes, a couple of kit lenses. You're still within the range of body only in some of the brands. So, that means you can potentially spend a budget in getting a kit, including a couple of lenses, and go on holiday with a brand new camera instead of, fork out even more money on some of the models. Exactly like what we just talked about XE-5.
I think, so just setting aside any disappointment about the technical changes, look at it from a value and marketing perspective. You've got a 20 megapixel camera with an EVF, with very good IBIS, which is very compact and weatherproof, with computational imaging and access to some very good lenses. I mean, the OM5 II is going to be sold with the 12 to 45 f4 as a kit lens, I believe. That is not, you can't judge that on the same level as other kit lenses. This is a very, very good lens. Most kit lenses, they'll get you started, but they're not great. But this one, on the contrary, is very good indeed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like you say, forget about the spec, but just looking at the price and what it can do at the moment in terms of $10.99 as the body. And then you think about the Fujifilm X-M5, the tiny little cameras that I also have. That is not weather seal. It's also plastic build, no IBIS, 26 megapixel, selling for 900 quid. So, for just over 100 quid more, you can get fully weather seal body, proper IBIS, and can do pretty much everything that the X-M5 does. And other than that, I don't see any other kind of close competitors when it comes to price wise?
I suppose you'd have to say the Canon EOS R7, but that's rather more expensive, a couple hundred more expensive. There's the Sony A6700, that's more expensive again. There's the Fujifilm X-S20, that could be at around the same price, but a little bit more. So it does have competition, but you're not going to get weatherproof. I think you get weatherproofing with the Canon. Not sure about the Sony A6700. I don't think the XS20 is probably weather sealed. But those are quite close rivals from the APS-C market, but they are a little bit more expensive.
They are, and obviously thinking about the cost of the lenses as well, which are also equally slightly more expensive when you come to think of the equivalents. If you want to get a couple of just the 1.8 primes, and then not only they're slightly more expensive, also slightly bigger as well. They're not humongous; those are 1.8 primes in the APS-C markets, but they are still a little bit bigger. But when we talk about APS-C, so if you're looking at the Nikon or the Canon APS-C, they are essentially the full frame lenses because use the same mount. So like their lenses are actually a bit bigger by default because this
They can be, yeah. And with Nikon, you can't get a stabilized APS-C camera.
No,
they don't have a stabilized APS-C model. It's only the R7 in the Canon range, and with Fujifilm, you have to start at the XS20.
Yep.
So it's not by no means a given that you get all of these things in the camera at that price.
Absolutely, man. I think it is interesting to see OM System has done to the pricing for the new camera, and And another thing that also kind of interests me, obviously, this is completely personal. There's nothing to do with OM. It's not official. And is that they have launched 2 new cameras this year so far. They have the OM3 early this year, and they had the OM-5 Mark II. So, it's kind of rare, since the Olympus days for them to release 2 cameras in a year. And I don't know whether they are shortening the product cycles or they simply trying to do some product releases, a certain number of product releases every year. And I know that, they're, on the roadmaps, at least there are a couple of lenses are coming out as well. So potentially they might have 3, maybe even 4 products by the end of the year.
I do feel that what OM Systems launch has been to maintain relevance.
Right.
Not to bring anything completely new, but just to stay current. So I feel they are worthwhile modifications and updates, but I would call them more like maintenance releases myself, just to make that model still competitive.
Yeah,
2 or 3 years after it was launched.
I think at the same time, so they are also trying to. I can see the movement at the moment, correct me if I'm springing into a slightly different wrong angle there, but they previously, when Olympus launching different products, they had the Pen series, they have the OMD series, then they have the EPL series, then they have the EP series. They have quite a few different lines going on simultaneously, and the specs and the technologies are always kind of a bit of a mix and match. There's kind of no, defined kind of line that you say that, okay, this is, has obviously the EM1 is always going to be latest and the greatest. It's got to be the flagship camera. So that is always got everything, right? But then the rest of the lines are, it's a little bit of a kind of mix and match a little bit. Sensors wise, the processors, and it's a mixed bag, right? And so they may be trying to realign things a little bit more to make it a little bit more clear in terms of like, now you got the OM1, the OM3, the OM5. They're trying to hit the reset button. So now you should expect the OM5 would be, properly at the bottom now, at this moment in time anyway. Yeah. Don't know whether it's going to be EM10 equivalent in the future, but at the moment the OM5 is at the bottom. Then they got the mid tier, which is OM3, and then OM1 will be the top tier.
Yeah, I think we might get an OM10 at some point. Who knows?
Who knows?
But then it is so close to the OM5 technically that you have to wonder if it's worth doing. Yeah, because you have to if you have a range of cameras, you have to keep proper separation in the features and pricing. So with hindsight, I think you would say that the decision to stay with an unstacked sensor was wise for the sake of the OM3's position.
Yes.
I do wonder if maybe the OM1 would have been better restyled as an OM1X with an integrated grip, because if you're going to make a camera that focused on sports action and birding, for example, give an integrated grip.
Well, let's ask the audience who wants to see an OM1X at some point, in the future. I know like EM1X was always going to be an odd child in the company. There is love and hate, kind of commons in the community. People are the people who love the camera would just really love it, and just say, oh, it's got great handling. It's a very rugged camera. It's very capable, very fast. Like you can't go wrong with the EM1X. I mean, I myself love the EM1X. I mean, in fact, I'm using this for streaming, for the past few years now. I just love this camera for a bit. But at the same time, those who hate it would say that, oh man, God, it's as big as a full frame camera. It's just ridiculous. A micro four third camera is supposed to be small, supposed to be compact and lightweight, but this is completely opposite.
You've got some of those big telephotos, haven't you?
I did, yeah. And I mean, I had some of the original 4/3 lenses, which was heavy, yes.
Those big telephotos, were they easier to manage on your OM1X or the OM1?
OM1X, always. Yes, it's a simple answer. It feels more solid. Because of the integration. Even if you add the grip for the OM1 or the EM1, because it's an add-on grip, no matter how tight you screw that thing at the bottom, it's still going to have a tiny bit of play. I don't know if anyone would notice that. But if you hold something really heavy, if you hold something heavy, you will feel that play a little bit when you wobble around. And that's something that I don't like, and integrated grip it feels so different, feels so much solid, and especially holding these big, massive, long lenses.
Well, this is the thing. I think as well with these big lenses, I understand your point and the point other people make that micro four thirds is supposed to produce a smaller camera. It produces a smaller system.
Yep.
The cameras may not be smaller, but the lenses certainly are.
Yeah.
So those big OM telephotos you've been using, you've shown us in the past.
Yeah.
Either they don't have a full frame or APS-C equivalent, or if they do, it is absolutely colossal. So you do get the benefit of the small system, but it's in the lenses, not in the cameras.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and also, we talked about it before, right? It's about handling as well. Like not all of us has tiny hands, and if you just simply look at like the EM5, the OM5, for instance, if you look at how I hold it at the moment, you see that my pinky is actually loose at the bottom. So like it's not actually, the body's not long enough for me to actually properly hold it properly. So a slightly longer body means bigger body would definitely makes it feel a little bit better, but it's okay if you have like a tiny prime lens stuck onto the camera. That's totally fine. But if you have something slightly bigger, then you can't hold it properly. And in that case, you really, really want to have something with bigger grip. And by then, the camera would definitely go big in size. And there you go. There's no win-win, right? And people always say, oh, it should be small. But yeah, small is fine. I'm up for the small. I love small cameras. But at the same time, if I use small camera, I use small lenses. I don't use big lenses. If I want to use big lenses, I go for the big camera.
Yeah, this is just how it works. And I think you notice this particularly in the larger formats. If you can get very compact full frame camera bodies that become very uncomfortable with most of the lenses you might want to use with them. So you do need a body that has the correct proportions for the lenses you want to use, just for basic comfort, really. Yeah. And Anthony actually has something kind of interesting that I would like to bring it up to maybe just have a small discussion on that. And I would like to hear from all of your thoughts as well. So, OM System needs to introduce all new technology to make sure they get noticed with something groundbreaking to tell the photography community they are not dead. Right, obviously they're not dead, but in terms of technology, what do you think, Rod?
we haven't really seen some great advancement or groundbreaking technologies, not just from OM system. If you look at the Lumix community, the Lumix is the same. It's kind of went stagnant for the past few years. Yes, they might have upped the megapixel to 25, but that is not a stack sensor. If you talk about sensor technologies, OMs did jump to stack sensor, but then it's still maintaining the same megapixels, 20 megapixels. So apart from that, they haven't really advanced that much in other than, yes, new sensor, maybe a slightly faster processor.
I think that most of the technical advances we might be able to think of are on very much more expensive cameras. For example, we might want a global shutter. Well, we can see how much a Sony A9 III costs. You could scale it down, it would be cheaper.
Yeah.
Is it worth paying the extra? What else could we say? We'd like a 40 megapixel sensor. I'm not sure how technically feasible that is with the OM system, but I think my argument against increasing resolution with OMD is that it's the wrong camera to do it with. This is a camera that excels at speed and size. Don't try and make the system do something it can't be good at. I don't know what other technical advances we could consider. Most other makers have more or less ground to a halt as far as stills photography is concerned. The main advantages are in things like video, where you now get improved heat sinks, faster readouts, active cooling, 8K video, dual processors, much faster processing generations. These are not things that most people want, and if they do want them, I'm not sure that that the OM system is really the right format. I suppose the other argument is that if you really are into video, get a GH7.
Yeah,
you don't have to swap your lenses. It's a different brand, and I don't think OM system could make a camera to challenge the GH7. So I think it's all very well having this general idea that OM system needs to do something dramatic. Nobody else is, because nobody else knows what to do or has any great appetite to do it. How long is Nikon's 20 megapixel APS-C sensor been around? That started with the D7500 DSLR.
Yeah.
How long ago is that? I have to look it up. Several years. There's no sign of a new one of those.
No.
In full frame cameras, Sony's still carrying on with its 24 megapixel sensor. Same with this APS-C, that they've used a 26 megapixel sensor in a couple of places. This is all slow incremental stuff. It's not just OM system, it's everyone.
Yes,
So
I agree.
If another maker does come out with a dramatic new technology, it's not in a camera you or I would buy. This is in
or
something
afford
like
to buy.
No, like the Sony A1 or the A9 III or the Canon EOS R1. These are not cheap cameras.
No, but I mean, actually, to be fair to OM system, actually, if you think about groundbreaking technologies, they did have more new computational stuff in the past couple of years. The Live Grad ND is a brand new features that people may not have taken a serious look at it, but for those who use that technology will think that, oh man, that is groundbreaking, that is cool. For me personally, because I do a lot of traveling, and it really does mean that I don't need to carry grad filters anymore. I could still use normal ND filters to lengthen the long exposures in combination with the grad ND if I really want to darken the sky, a portion of the sky. But I think that is actually really, really cool feature. Like I always talk about, the live bulb and live composite in the OM system is great. Still no one else has done the same thing as them. But in combination now with the light grad ND, which is to me is the next best things in terms of computational stuff on the OM system cameras. I don't use the live ND that much, but the live grad ND, I love it. So it's something that I think that people may not have taken notice because they don't use that technology, but I think for someone who do, it's actually pretty cool.
I think so, and I think some of this computational technology is unfairly overlooked simply because people aren't in the habit of using it. If you think to Panasonic's 4K and 6K photo modes, with the you could shoot
grab the
4K
frame route,
30
right?
for the
Yeah.
extractor frame. The post focus mode, where you just so quickly you don't notice it. The camera takes a whole series of shots with different focus points.
Yeah.
In playback, you tap on the part of the picture you want in focus, and it's there. It seems like magic, but I think it's because it's outside normal photographic practice. People can't be bothered to get into it. So
Yeah.
I think the OM system computational stuff is very clever. But speaking for myself, my habits lead me towards doing it the old way. I mean, I wouldn't use the live ND grad. I'll just bracket my shots and merge them later, and then do it in software. It's just habit and what you're used to using. I did briefly use the keystone correction on the EM12.
They still have it. They still have the keystone correction. Yes.
But I used it, and after about half of it, I thought, the hell with this. I'll do it in software. Because there's a certain amount of fiddling around.
I guess, the certain features like that is definitely now been superseded by those who like to temper with the files, like in post productions, and which is there's no right or wrong there, but there are people who just like the convenience of having in-camera like corrections and in-camera effects, and those people are more likely to use those features. And speaking of which, like people who use Fujifilm cameras always say, their film simulation is the greatest thing ever, and those are basically profiles, right? Like just any sort of color profile you get in any cameras. And for those who use the Fujifilm simulations, they if they are saying what they are, that means they're not going to do anything in post, and they just use any JPEG straight out of the cameras. And but I don't know how many of them they actually do that. And for many of the enthusiasts, for instance, they really would like to do a little bit of fine tuning, a little bit of editing in post. Look at the raw file, lift the shadow up, pull the highlight down. You can do all kinds of stuff with that, right? And then you apply whatever color grading you want to do in post. Not really using the inbuilt profiles from whatever companies you're talking about, because every company offers some kind of color profiles now. They may not call film simulations, but they have something fairly similar. And so it's kind of like a thing, right, these days. And it's two types of photographers now. You either JPEG user, like everything in the camera, or you just like to mess around with the raw file afterward.
I tend to shoot raw because I tend to shoot in a lot of very high contrast settings.
Yeah.
I just want to be able to have a little extra leeway with the shadows and highlights. I think I could shoot JPEG only if I chose to, but then my issue with film simulations is that they don't go far enough, and the things I want to do with a look, I would have to do in software, because the cameras don't really go far enough in the directions I'd want it to go. So I'm not particularly moved by that argument.
And
I think I'll just carry on shooting.
As another comment here, just fairly quickly, Macau, I think the sensor's not the problem, but the big shame is in 2020, TruePix 9, he's talking about basically older processors being used in a new camera, but that's not uncommon. We've seen that many times from all across the industry, right? OM system OM5 Mark II is using the TruePix 9 processor, but if you look at a lot of the other cameras out there, they are using old processors. They just never really talk about it.
Does it make a big difference?
A little bit, perhaps.
Do you feel you see the difference between TruePix 10 and 9?
Not unless you're using computational stuff. That's my point. If you use a lot of computational stuff, yes, the TruePix 10 processor is faster. So if you do handheld high res, for instance, and on the OM1 and OM3, it really literally just takes a couple of seconds to process, so you can start shooting again. On the OM5 Mark II or anything before that, it will take about 4 to 5 seconds for the process to finish. So it is a bit slower. But then when you do high res shots, you are not doing like a burst rate shots. You're not doing like 10 frames per second. You're not doing that kind of thing. It's one of those shots that you are carefully composed, and then you're trying to get the detail out from that frame. So it's not a sports setting. Let's put it that way. Even in the latest Tupic 10 scenarios, and I know people are talking about ND. Live ND is not having the same EV step. That's another thing. The Tupic 10 has more ND step. I'm not entirely sure. I think Chris Nichols on the Petapixel talked about this, but I'm not entirely sure whether it's down to the processor. I think it's something to do with the actual sensor. If you think about the live ND features, all the higher number live ND computational settings are available on all the stacked sensor cameras, the OM1, OM1 Mark II, and OM3, right? So that possibly what makes the difference, not the processor, it's actually the sensor.
I'd be more likely to use live ND if I got 10 stops, because I consider 10 stops to be about the level where you get those really blurred effects even in bright daylight. I think 6 stops to me is about 60% of the way there. You still got to wait for it to be slightly darker.
Well, I mean, it's a handy thing, you just have to choose your scenarios when you use that feature. Because it's still computational stuff, you still have to make sure that there's no significant movement in the scene. It's not going to be windy and things like that. Otherwise, you're going to see artificial movements. And so it's best used in cases where nothing is moving, for instance. So like if you're shooting seascape, and I don't know whether you want to see the sea completely blurred out like a mirror or like a soft cotton. Yeah. And if you want to if you would like to do that kind of shot, I don't think the computational thing would do you any good unless you choose the golden hours when the light is starting to dim, when you can maximize the shutter speed.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, but in that case, if you want to do it bright daylight, I don't think even a 10-stop ND filter may not do it for you. You have to actually add multiple layers of NDs to be able to do something like that.
I think doesn't lead now to a 15 stop.
Yeah. 15 stop.
ND. I think so, but I can't remember what it's called.
Right.
But yeah. So there's that. But I think I'd be more interested in the computational technology if, for example, there was an HDR mode that didn't actually bake in the HDR, but just captured. So in Lightroom and Capture One, you can merge images into, I think it's a 32-bit HDR DNG file, which is not edited, but it has a 32-bit dynamic range.
And another thing that people ask me about, I'm pretty sure some of you may bring it up later on, but I might as well say it now. Another feature that this one has and no other OM system has at this moment in time is something called the night vision mode in the camera. So I'm not entirely sure whether it uses infrared or not, but you can actually switch on the mode in almost pitch black environment where the EVF usually struggle, and actually any sort of viewfinder will struggle to see. So this night vision mode is kind of crazy because I did try that in my toilet when I closed the door, and then when I switch it on, I could actually see in the dark. And it's a little bit crazy to see something like that. It's almost like one of those night vision goggles. You get kind of imagery, so it's almost like monotone, and then it's not crispy sharp, because it's obviously digitally enhanced and trying to make something out of it. But you can see, which is the main thing. You can see, because I remember back in the days when I first started digital photography, trying to do some firework shots, and before the fireworks started, the ground was completely dark, and I can't really compose because I can't see anything, and it's hard to focus, it's hard to compose, it's just really hard. So I know people are talking about, is it the same as what they call the live view boost in the Olympus or Olympus camera, which we had it in for years. So live view boost is actually slightly different. Live view boost is almost like cranking up the ISO all the way to the top. Yeah. So you got some really grainy EVFs.
It might just be turning up the gain on the EVF, not the sensor.
Yes, basically it is. So you're not actually seeing in the dark. So if it's still really dark, you can't see much apart from noise, basically. So it is actually different.
Of course, the night vision mode may just be making it up. And you can't check because you can't see.
But it's actually cool, you know. Like you have to get your hands on one to try. I'm trying to make a video out of it, so I can put it side by side. The OM5 Mark I and the Mark II, one in live view boost and one in live night vision, and put it side by side. Then you can actually see the difference between them. But when I tried it, I said like, oh, this is kind of handy. And you know, I remember the days I can't see anything, and this would definitely help me in terms of composition.
Also, why can't OM System do a handheld long exposure like the iPhone does? So you just hold the camera still and it merges 10 frames.
Right. Oh, so I see what you mean.
You eliminate the noise.
Yep.
But you still get a single image, and the IBIS is probably quite good enough.
But that's more or less what the Live ND does, right?
No, I'm talking about a handheld long exposure with the phone. You can stand there for 3 seconds, hold it as still as you can. You get a virtually noise-free.
Oh, and then you blend the image together.
No, it's blended in camera. But it would be more difficult to do with RAW files, but just blend it. Yeah, so that I think Sony did that for a while as well. Basically, you have to keep the camera as still as you can, but you get a noiseless, high-quality, low-light image.
Yeah.
If you can do it on the phone, I don't see why I can't do it on the camera.
If
That's
OM
a
system,
computational feature I would use.
If OM System is listening, that might be something coming out next. But yeah, so when you talk about, you know, because this is the whole conversation about, you know, technological advancements. I mean, I think sensors, processors are pretty much peaked up now. I don't see anything kind of like dramatically. We talked about this many times now. We haven't seen great advancements in the last few years. Yeah, there may be a gain here and there, but they are very incremental, very... you know, more like an evolution than revolution. But computational stuff, on the other hand, I think there is still room to improve. There's still room to do something crazy, like you said already. And I think OM System's still leading, if not, even they may not be at the pace that people might expect, you know, but we did see better live ND, we got a new great ND earlier this year. We do see new things, you know, so it's not that, you know, they haven't done anything. In fact, they have done something. And the night vision mode and the OM5 Mark II, these are all new things. And whether you use it or not, that's another thing. But they have done something.
It is quite difficult for any other camera maker that's really making any great technical strides these days.
Yeah.
And I do wonder sometimes if we all want something new to kind of excite us and move us forward. But maybe what we've already got is fine.
Yeah,
controversial observation, but I'm just saying. So I mean, for me, the OM5 II is probably better for what I do than the OM3, because the OM3's got a lot of stuff I don't really use, and it hasn't got much of a grip, and it's much more expensive.
Well,
I also the OM5 for me has the best controls at the moment of any of the OM cameras. The twin dials on the top. I miss those on the OM1, and those two dials.
I love it exactly. Because they're really just like this, isn't it? You can just turn here and there, like with just like the thumb and the index finger. You just do this, and it's so close to each other. It's so easy to use. I do agree as well, because if you look at the G9 Mark II, for instance, which I also have it right here, and if you look at the control, well, this is a common control like most of the cameras these days, which has got the back dial really far apart from the thumb and the index finger.
Yeah.
I just much prefer they're quite close to each other. And
they are quite far apart,
They are, but most of the new cameras are like that, though. And in fact, I think the OM1 series is a bit like that too, because they now have they move the dial just under the top plates now, so it's a little bit different to that. Yeah,
don't like it as much.
But speaking of controversy, what about this?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So again, you know, I don't know. What do you guys think about this camera here? This is a relatively expensive point and shoot camera that does not give you RAW capabilities. It's a JPEG only point and shoot camera that turned the sensor upside down.
Well, I know there's been a very great deal of comment about this already. So I'm just looking at lomography at the moment. I'll add my 2 pence. People complain about the price.
Yeah.
Where can you get a cheaper point and shoot new on today's market?
Well,
Can you get one?
just stop you from there. For those who missed the beginning of our chat, we talked about the second-hand prices
Yes.
of point and shoot cameras on the secondary market. They are going crazy at the moment, and I'm not joking, right? They're all £600-700 for a 10-year-old camera.
Yeah. So I think we're in that place right now where the point and shoot camera is not going to be cheap. Canon power shots used are ridiculous money. They were all right when they were new, but there's no way they're worth the money they go for now.
No.
Also, I haven't quite finished. I've just got one more thing to say about MFT.
Yep.
People talking about pricing. Lumix G9 II. How is it ever appropriate for that to be £1,700 and
Yep.
still 1,700 today? I don't think that is a good deal myself. I think that is worse. That's one of the worst examples. I mean, it's fine. It's all right, but it's too much money.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Well,
I'll let you carry on with the X-Half.
No, I'm just reading some comments at the moment. It's once again, as soon as I bring this camera out, you can already see some divided comments.
Yeah.
Chuck say that I'm all for camera companies being creative. But the thing is, you said it already. If this is not a camera for you, don't buy it. It's no one's forcing you to buy it. You don't have to like it either.
No.
But
I mean,
obviously, go on. Sorry.
If you think it's too primitive, buy like a Q3. I mean, admittedly, that's going to be, how much are they now?
But $5,500.
Q3s. Yeah. So have some perspective, I would say.
Yeah.
And if you think, oh, the X100 is better, well, try and get one.
Yeah,
So,
and that's
you've
almost £2,000 now.
You've got to be realistic and practical, I think, and accept the prices and expectations are going up, and you have to look at this in terms of what's happening today and the products around you and what it's competing against.
Yeah, and to be honest, this camera isn't aiming for enthusiasts or professionals anyway. It isn't. It is really aiming for beginners, people who use the smartphone, people who like to use Instax cameras. And I said it before. This is like an upgrade for them. And because they have made it so easy to connect to the Instax printer and also use the app on the Fujifilm app, it makes it really like a consumer camera on steroid. It's not a professional camera. It's not something that you want to temper the files or anything like that, because it's all burning and the film simulations all burn to the file, and you can't change anything. So all you get is a JPEG, is a flavored JPEG files.
I think as well, not to get too woolly and sentimental about this whole thing, I think the X-Half is a camera that strikes a chord with a generation that's struggling to reconnect with the things that are important to them. We're surrounded, we're under a deluge of images from people who are much better photographers than us. There are too many cameras. Everyone's an expert. It's too technical. It's all become very soulless. And I think the X-Half is going to appeal to people who think, oh my gosh, how can I regain that simple enjoyment I got from taking photographs? Yes. And I think it probably does that rather well.
It does. I mean, like I've used it. Like I said to you, Rod, earlier. I mean, I used it last weekend when I went out for a family outing. Just going to a local cinema, have something to eat in restaurants, just have a general day out family thing. I just took this camera out. I didn't take anything special or anything, because all I wanted is some snaps, right? I could use my phone, but using this does actually remind me a little bit of the old time when I used to take out a proper film point and shoot camera. You have to wait a little bit. Things weren't quick, a little bit slow, and then and of course you have to wait to see the images. But you can't see it nowadays if you don't use the film mode that they have in the camera. You can't see the images, and for surprisingly though, I know people were criticizing about the LED lights here, and instead of a proper flash. I actually use the LED in some of the indoor shots, and it does actually give me that look, right? It's not proper flash, but it does give you that look. So perhaps this is like the modern kind of thing or modern approach now. Why is a flash which can burn out at some point? The LED is more reliable, it lasts a bit longer, and so I think they may have made a good choice there. But just to answer Patrick's question, I think you just asked me here about the X-Half. Is the X-Half as slow and laggy in some reviewers have said? Right. That depending on your expectation. Right. Don't forget that what we just said about this camera. This is a consumer level camera. This is really just a point and shoot camera. If you compare this camera to any point and shoot cameras, not the premium ones, not like the RX100 series, not some of this high end stuff, looking at traditional point and shoot camera, it is actually about the same, if not a little bit faster than those cameras. Definitely not going to be as fast as, these high-end cameras, even like my RX105, which is 10-year-old. Those are high-end AF stuff. You've got face detect, hybrid AF system algorithm is way better than this one. So, but it's still usable. You click on it, it does acquire AF in, I don't know, half a second, maybe a little bit less than that. So it's not going to be snappy like a high-end camera that is so used to these days. It's a little bit slower. But I don't have a problem with that. Because first of all, this is a 1-inch sensor, and the maximum aperture is 2.8. So the equivalent depth of field is quite deep to start with. So it's a little bit more forgiving in that sense. So you can choose in the mode that actually allows you to use a manual focus, although there's no distance scale or anything like that. But once you use a manual focus, set it to f5.6, you can just snap all day long without having to worry about anything misfocus. Because if you worry about laggy performances, just like the snap focus mode on the Ricoh GR series, you can do that. Basically, just predefine a zone that is in focus and just snap away, and that way you're not going to miss anything. So depending what sort of thing you're going for, but to me, I'm happy with the AF performance. I'm not going to use this to photograph my kids running around. It's just more like a moment thing. I'm just going to snap here and there when they're walking around, and it's totally fine. I find that even with the slightly slower AF performance, because like I said about the depth of field, and even at 2.8, I don't see any soft images because the 2.8 aperture is equivalent to f8, f11 in a full frame term, so it's quite deep. So I don't think you have to worry too much, especially if your subject is about 2 to 3 meters away from you. You definitely have no problem whatsoever about the AF.
I think cameras, it's a measure of how similar cameras have become.
Yeah.
That nobody varies their expectations at all.
Yeah.
Every camera has to focus fast. Every camera has to have this aperture. Every camera has to have that sensor. It is okay to have cruder cameras. For people who don't want this stuff. I haven't tried the autofocus to know if it would be a problem for me, but this is not surely a camera for burst shooting, subject tracking, face detection. It's not that kind of camera. This is a camera just where you say to people, go and stand there. I want to take a picture of our day out together. And it seems to me it will do that perfectly. And what it will also do is you can do that picture, you can make a little diptych with this second exposure alongside it, which no other camera does. And it's quite a strange, compelling thing to do. Yeah. 2 shots in the same image, if you see what I mean. Yes.
And Patrick actually responded, specifically the responsiveness of the film winder. Right.
All right, yeah. That is a bit of a,
Well, actually, I think it could potentially be user error, right? And for whatever reviewers. I mean, now I've been using the camera in properly and extensively. I don't have it for just one day to test it or something, so I have used it. I think it's fine. I don't think it's laggy in terms of the film winder. You do have to wind it full for it to engage. So that means that if people hasn't done the full turn or to the limit, it doesn't actually register. So you just have to be a little bit more careful when you operate a film winder if you do decide to get one. And it's not that it's not responsive or laggy. I find it fine. If you turn it full, it does register. Once it's registered, you're ready to shoot again. So it's not, because it's not actually a mechanical winder, not like film cameras or anything like that. So like you're not gonna have that same sensation if you're coming from a film background. You've had any sort of film cameras that has a film advance, so you're not gonna get that. This is a digital mimic, of what it's supposed to be, but you don't have the same resistance. You don't feel the click of the the mechanical movement inside the camera. You don't feel any of that. It's very digital, very fake, in a way. If I want to use that word fake, but it is fake. It's not a proper film winder. It literally is a switch.
Ratchet and a spring in. Should have been ratchet and a spring.
In fact, it is a switch, so you just have to turn it all the way. You have to make sure you turn it all the way to switch it on. It's a switch. So if you don't switch it by touching the limit, you're not going to register it.
I think I always felt with film cameras that the act of winding on made you pause to think.
Yep.
And may put you in a better frame of mind for the next shot, because it takes a moment. It's a conscious act. It punctuates the intervals between shots, so you don't spray and pray.
Yep.
Every shot becomes something that you give at least half a second's thought to, for that reason. So in some ways, slowing you down, I think, can be a good thing. It's not a good thing if you're photographing the Olympics, obviously.
No.
But if you're trying to do some more contemplative photography, even travel photography, that little interval where you have to wind the film on, always gave you time to stop and think again before the next shot. Yeah.
Another thing that people were complaining about the X-Half is obviously the viewfinder window, and they said, I looking through the viewfinder, and then when I click the shot, the subject is off center. Well, because it's off center, so it's got the parallax, error in these things. I think what Fujifilm should have done is put these little frame line windows in the inside, just like some of the even like old film point and shoot camera had that. Like most of the point and shoot film cameras that we had before do have the window on the side, right? Most of them did have it on the side instead of in the middle. So when those on the side would usually give you a little window so you can actually see where your subject's supposed to be positioned, so you know roughly whether it's center or not. This one doesn't have anything, so it literally just viewing straight through, and that means if you put your subject in the middle through this viewfinder, you always see that your subject is going to be either on the right or on the left, depending on where you put it. So it's not going to be accurate. So in that case, if you want something to be perfectly positioned in the frame, you have to use the rear screen instead of the viewfinder.
I think if you go back a couple of generations to point and shoot film cameras, the viewfinders were impossibly vague, but it's just how it was. I mean, I haven't tried the X-Half. I'm willing to bet though it's a bit more precise than those old film cameras, or even maybe a disposable camera. But parallax, for anyone who's brought up on direct vision cameras, so you don't have through the lens viewing, you just got used to it. It's how it was.
It is, yeah. But to be honest, even seasoned Leica shooter, which rangefinder shooters, and if they used only the viewfinder instead of the electronic viewfinder, use the optical viewfinder on the side, and you will find that a lot of the shots are not dead center. That's the reason why, because it is really hard to judge, and also depending on how used, what sort of focal length you're using, because they all changes. They've got different frame lines underneath, so like everything can get a little bit complicated, and also how close the subject is to the camera. It's all down to experience at the end of the day, because experience like a shooter or rangefinder shooter would know how to adjust themselves when it comes to composition, because they know.
I think as well, most rangefinder shooters tend to shoot a little bit wider because they know there's going to be some give. I always got told off by my art editor when I was on magazines, because I always cropped things too tight, and it gave him no leeway. But with a rangefinder camera, you know that you have to allow a bit. So that when you get the shot back, there's always a little bit more. You're almost certainly going to have to crop it to get the same accuracy. But you just change your technique. I think it's just a different way of shooting.
It is. I mean, I think Patrick also raised the point as well. Even a cheaper Instax camera has two sets of frame lines. I think it's an oversight that I don't know why Fujifilm has done it without frame lines in here. It's just really just a plain window. You know, they could have done something more, especially considering the price, right? You know, and yeah, they should at least add a couple of things in there.
Or maybe they want to make the experience as primitive as possible. That's what we're paying
yeah,
for, right?
I guess simplicity. You're paying for the pain for
Yeah.
simplicity,
I
and
guess.
and well, I mean, and also Patrick also mentioned about the price is very close to XM5.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, they're about just about 100, just over £100 difference. So they are very close to each other.
I think all I'd say about that is the XM5 doesn't have a viewfinder.
No.
And I think the other thing I think you would say is you're comparing apples and oranges, aren't you? The X-half can't do what the XM5 can do, but the XM5 doesn't do what the X-half do. They do a different set of things. So if you're just trying to buy solely on value, then I think you would make a different decision. But you have to try and buy things based on what you want the product to be and to do.
Yep, absolutely. I think you're right there. I think it's hard to really justify the price. I mean, and if you are comparing like this, I mean, clearly the X-half and the XM5 is aiming at very, very different market. You know, they're not aiming for the same crowd. You know, it's no comparison there. I think for me, I bought it only because I want to experience it, and whether it's for me or not, you know, time will tell. But at the moment, I'm having a little bit of fun with it, and I don't mind a little bit of a kind of primitive images coming off from a camera.
Well, fingers crossed, Jimmy. It goes in a short supply, and you'll sell it for more than you paid for it.
Apparently
that's
so.
how it seems to work now. Yeah, apparently.
Apparently, and both my what is it? My XM5 and the X-half are both in demand, and the XM5 is still waiting list apparently.
Yeah, I don't think it's late. I think they just announced it ahead of when it's going on sale.
Right.
So, yeah, I think the X-half is only overpriced if what you actually want is an XM5 or an XS20, because it's overpriced only if you don't want what it's got. And if you don't want what it does, don't don't consider
Actually,
it. But how many cheap point and shoots are there?
None.
Cheaper than that. You can't buy them anymore.
No. Actually, I want to expand this a little bit actually, because since we talk a little bit about price, right? Price makes you compare. I think that's the general consensus now, right? You know, like when you see prices of cameras when they're so close to each other, you naturally will compare them. It's almost like you're comparing Micro Four Third to APS-C to full frame if they're within the same price bracket. You know, let's say 1,500 quid. Right, you can get a high-end Micro Four Third camera. You can get a mid-tier APS-C camera. Also, and then you get a low-end full-frame camera, which in that bracket.
You have to look at the system, don't you? Not just the camera. I think when APS-C camera bodies approach the price of full-frame bodies, as they do now, you might think, oh, go full-frame. But you've also got to look at the price and size of full-frame lenses. You can't use the camera without lenses. So I think in that instance, APS-C might still have an advantage. I think it's unwise to compare only the cameras based on price. And I also think you should, it's very easy to get drawn into buying specifications rather than the right combination of features for what you want to do. You need to get the thing that's right for what you want to do, not necessarily the thing that's cheap, that gives you the most for the money.
Yep, I think so.
Thing, not the cheap thing.
I think at the end of the day, I mean, like I always said, you know, you can watch as many review videos or read as many reviews articles as possible, but ultimately you really, really want to go on the camera store and try the camera yourself and hold it in your hand, take a few shots. If they allow you to do this 24-hour test drive thing, do it. Take it home, go around and shoot around to see if it's for you.
I think it's better. I think what Jimmy just said is exactly right. Go to a store and try it. The danger with getting all your information online is that these days the affiliate creator market is so mature that every time somebody posts a video, I'm accepting YouTubing, and I don't do it either. But what most people do is they do a video to get you to buy something. So you'll get a lot of, you'll either get that kind of video which says this is great, how to buy it, best thing I've ever used, nothing else comes close, way better than anything else, or you'll get the video designed for hits, which is, this is complete rubbish, waste of time, so and so's dropped a bomb here, don't buy this camera, it's the worst camera ever made. So you have to steer away between reviewers who want you to buy something and reviewers who are just trying to get you clickbait. You have to try and get down the middle.
And that's one thing that not many people actually talked about, is actually influencers within the influencers. Right, you know, I may not have bring this up before, but it's actually very true. If you think about, you know, some of these, you know, like normal consumers and people like to consume content online could easily be swayed by content creators or influencers. But within the influencers community, they also get influenced by the bigger influencers, right? You know, if 2 or 3 of these mega big influencers or reviewers talk about something, if they buy into the idea that what they were saying, they will echo it in their videos, and then subsequently
because the aura rubs off on them if they agree with this famous person.
So then you've got a wave of these videos all talking about the same complaints or same praises or thing, you know, that they may not necessarily experience or actually understand sometimes. Then don't forget, you know, like if these tens of thousands of photography reviewers out there on YouTube, they are not necessarily like full-time photographers, and many of them aren't. You know, they test things, but they may not actually understand certain features for what sort of usage. And in that sense, they may not truly appreciate what's behind it, you know, or who will be likely to use these sort of features or not, you know. And this is something that you have to be a little bit more careful when to listen to these sort of comments and things like that. Like, you know, we talked about it. Go to the camera store, get it in your hand, test it all out before you make the final decision. If you like the camera, if you like the look of it, you know, go ahead and try it.
For example, I mean, you're exactly right. If Chris and John on Petapixel, for example, were to review the Panasonic Lumix S1R2 and say, oh, this readout speed seems a bit slow, you can be sure within 24 hours there'll be another dozen YouTubers saying exactly the same thing with this massive clickbait headline. Then a week later, everyone will have forgotten about it because it doesn't really matter. This is how it works. Unfortunately, and this is the game that we're playing at the moment, and so it's going to be a bit more careful about you know, not saying that you have to distrust them, but sometimes you just simply miss it. Like the OM-5 Mark II review done by you know, Petapixels, they missed one thing, is that they claim that the memory card slot is UHS 1. In fact, it's UHS 2. And then I think Robin actually commented in the video, said that you've done it wrong because Olympus was the very first one to use UHS 2 specification for the memory cards, and that's dated back all the way to 2012 or 14. So they have been using UHS 2 ever since. There's no UHS 1 anymore. And so like the OM5 is always UHS 2. And that's the thing. Myths get propagated, criticisms get propagated and amplified. You need to find out for yourself.
Yes.
You need to pick a thing up, try it. In 15 minutes with a camera at a store, you'll find out much more about how you feel about it than spending 15 hours on YouTube watching other people saying what they think about it. Because it's what you think that matters.
Yes. Yeah. Especially in that you are the photographer, you are the one who's going to hold and use the camera, so you matter more than anybody else's.
Did I just tell people not to watch YouTube?
Don't. That means I don't exist anymore. But that's cool, right? You know, like I think today we got a general sense about certain things going on at the moment. But it is interesting, I think, just to recap a little bit. I think it's quite interesting to see Fujifilm has increased the price of the XE series to more or less of the flagship or premium pricing for the XE series now. And on the other hand, OM System has reduced the price for the OM5 bring it back to the EM5 Mark III level when it first launched some years ago. It's interesting tactics in both ways, and I don't know, what you feel about it, when it comes to pricings, and we talk about how crazy this thing is, and as like Patrick earlier said, this thing's expensive. It's very close to XM5. Everyone can put a values on an item, but whether that value can be justified by yourself, who will be the one using it, I think that's the reason. Yes.
I don't think there's any real absolute measure of value, except when you compare two identical things.
Yeah.
These aren't identical. And I think as well, we don't buy cameras on subscriptions. It's not like you get a series of updates to Lightroom and you think it wasn't worth the money.
Yep.
You aren't continually paying for ownership of your Olympus camera.
Yeah.
If I still had my EM5 Mark III,
yep,
I wouldn't have upgraded to the EM5, the OM5. I probably wouldn't upgrade to the OM5 too. But I wouldn't be angry at OM System for launching it. I'd say, that's interesting. Maybe next time around. They haven't taken my money without telling me. I had a choice.
Indeed, a choice it is. Yeah, but I'll be curious to see how the XE-5 does, because obviously it's quite divided within Fujifilm's community, because people who used to pay 900 quid for XE4, now they have to pay almost double the money for the new XE5. Right. I think it's quite upsetting for those people.
It'll do well for two reasons. First of all, existing users probably won't buy it. Somebody who's already got an XE series camera just won't buy it. Yeah. It's for new users. So two things. First of all, people will buy it because they can't get an X100 V1.
Yeah.
And this is the closest thing. Also, people will buy because it's expensive, which gives it a kind of air of quality and exclusivity. Yeah. If it's cheap, they wouldn't take it seriously. Because it's not cheap, they think, oh, I'd like that. It's expensive, I'd like it. So it's like the Leica strategy, but on a smaller scale. Reassuringly expensive. If it costs that much, it must be good, right?
But that's the thing, right? Is Fujifilm really playing the premium game now? Obviously they're starting to build up that kind of image in consumers' mind. We are a medium format camera maker, so we have the RX100, the GFX series, right? They're starting from £4,000 or £5,000, so we have expensive cameras. Now we have the APC camera. Yeah, not full frame, but they're cool. They're looking good. They have that vibe that everyone's looking for now. And the next best thing to get similar sort of vibe will be paying 5 times more for a Leica. You don't have to pay 5 times. You only have to pay a couple of grand for that.
Yeah, get this. It's fine, except the problem for Fujifilm is the same one that Panasonic has. There is no crossover.
Yeah.
If you're into the X system and think, do you know what? I think I'll get GFX.
Yeah.
You have to start from scratch. Everything you've got, you have to sell. When you go to medium format, you have to start again because there is no compatibility in the lens mounts. With Canon or Nikon or Sony, you can start with APS-C, and it's a fairly small step to go full frame. With Fujifilm going from X mount to GFX, it's like a wall with no door.
Yeah, it is.
Sadly.
Sadly.
Same for Panasonic. There's no way to get from Lumix G to Lumix S. You have to start again.
That's going to be interesting. But Patrick also mentioned the XE5 is much improved over XE4. Don't get me wrong, it's a big improvement, but I think for the price, they could have at least thrown in where the ceiling, right?
I would say then, just to satisfy me, what they could have done would be an XE5 with the old 26 megapixel sensor and no IBIS for 1,000, and an XE5R with 40 megapixels and IBIS at 1,600, and then give me a choice. Because for a camera of that type, I'd probably go for the cheaper one. Because I'm not trying to get a professional camera that does everything. But that's all we're being offered. So I think that's a bit irritating. It's like you like your little XM5, don't you?
I do like my XM5. it's tiny, it's small. 26 is sweet spot for me, you know. And
what if it had 40 megapixels and IBIS and been bigger, and say
No.
£1,300? You wouldn't buy it.
no.
No.
And it's, you know, they think about the price for the XM5. I think it's very reasonable for what it is, you know. And you know, for I don't know, 800 and something for very capable stills cameras. In fact, it's very good video camera as well. If you, and it hasn't got IBIS, so you have to put on the gimbal, but it is very capable when it comes to the video specs. It's actually pretty good. And likewise, you know, you know, I would like to also add a couple of £100 to get this as well. You know, I think for what it offers, you know, now the XM5 the OM5 even more bang for bucks. I think, you know, in terms of the pricing, is actually the XM5. When you talk about small compact cameras, I think XM5 and the OM5 are both quite good. And obviously, for a couple of hundred, you get slightly smaller sensors, you know, but you gain like weather sealing, the IBIS, and things like that. So really depending what sort of usage you are, you know. But I think they're quite close to each other, and I do think they're both very valid in the market. And I mean, I like both. That's why I have both, and it's just pretty interesting cameras.
If we could, I don't know whether you want to stay on cameras. I was just going to mention another new launch.
Oh,
yes. We
yes.
were talking about this earlier. The
Yes.
Sigma 17 to 40 f1.8.
Oh yeah, the beast. The beast.
You asked me about this. I was in the middle of doing my shopping in Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
Jimmy phoned me. There's a PA announcement about something about fire alarms. Then for the next half hour, they're testing the fire alarms. So Jimmy and I only got about one word in three. But basically, I was particularly struck by the Sigma 70 to 40 f1.8.
Yeah.
This is constant f1.8.
Yeah.
And Jimmy was saying, oh, that's going to be expensive. What, about 1,300, something like that? £779. It's an extremely well specified, well made lens for not much money.
I'm curious.
It's just
I'm curious.
Big. It's just big.
Imagine I throw that lens
big
into
lens.
Imagine I throw the lens onto XM5.
No, don't imagine that.
Well,
one
they
moment.
do offer X mount, right? And there's APS-C lens, so they do offer X mount. So I could mount it on XM5.
Yeah, I think that could be quite a good standard lens for something like an XT5 or an XT, because as you know, I'm not a massive fan of the Fuji glass, and if you're prepared to contemplate the Fujinon 16 to 55 f2.8, then I think I'd soon have this 17 to 40 1.8.
It's cheaper too, right?
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't imagine it's bigger. It's probably quite similar. But this is an f1.8 zoom.
Yeah.
And I did own in the DSLR version. It's a really nice lens. Very good.
It was a cult classic lens, you know, during the mirrorless revolutions at the time, you know, when Sony the first A7 came out, and I remember a lot of photographers, actually not the A7, sorry, the Lumix, right? You know, there are a lot of people trying to adapt this lens, getting a meta boost, a meta bump booster to use this SLR lens on the Lumix body for filming, because you can use the speed booster to magnify or reduce the magnifications from 2 times to like 1.75 or 1 times. So because it's APS-C focal length, so it's not as a bigger deal when it comes to converting to MFT once you use the adapter. And also you're gaining also a lot of light as well, because the speed booster also give you more light into the sensor. So that kind of alleviate a lot of the deficiency on the Micro Four Thirds sensors back in the days. And so a lot of people were using it for filming. And they, because of filming, people weren't care about autofocus performances, so people just manually do that anyway. And so it works well. It works well for the Micro Four Thirds filming industry. And that lens, I remember, was selling like hotcakes. You know, everyone wanted to get that lens on the MFT.
Well, this mirrorless version also has a declickable aperture ring.
Nice.
Except in the RF banks, I think Canon's decided nobody can have an aperture ring. but no, the Fuji X version has an aperture ring, so it's a very nice match for the XT5, XH2, XH2S.
Yeah, I know.
Interesting one to look out for. So that's nice to see. But since we're all quite worked up about pricing, I thought that was quite a good price, $779.
It is. Because I don't know, some of you may have watched my recent videos. I tested the Tamron 35 to 150 f2 to 2.8 zoom. And also at the same time, I also got the Tamron 28 to 70 2.8 to test as well. And I personally think the 35 to 150 is exceptionally good, and is I don't know if it's worthy of the price, but it's an f2 lens, well, f2 at the maximum end, and then it does stop down to f2.8, but 150 2.8 is still very shallow, still very fast for what it is. And but 35 f2 is a good street lens, so it's a very fast street lens on its own. So you can actually open up and get some separations and like for environmental portraits and things like that. It's a very usable lens. AF is good, and yeah, I mean, I think this could be big, but it could replace a few of my prime lenses altogether. So, like, you know, I'm tempted to sell some of my prime lenses just to get that one lens for my Nikon ZF.
Just as long as you don't mind a big lens.
It is heavy. I have to give that, you know.
It's also only APS-C, so you probably have to use it on your ZF-C.
Yeah.
Kind of
so it will be interesting to see.
It's a bit cheaper than the Panasonic f1.8 zooms, and they are massive. Those Micro Four Thirds ones.
Yes. And they're expensive. They're like £1,800 in the UK. Yeah. So I'll probably try to get a copy of that to see to test it to see if
it's interesting.
Yeah, to see if it runs well on the ZFC or the XM5, and that will be quite interesting to see. But for $799, I think personally it's a bargain.
Yeah, I do, and I think that's about the only bit of positive news I've got this week. So happy to share it.
Well, another positive is OM5. They did reduce the price. Don't forget.
I think so, and I think you know, it's always the same old glass half empty, glass half full thing.
Yeah.
If you've already got an OM5 or an M5, don't buy it. It's not for you. But if you don't have any of these things, this is more attractive than the camera that went before it.
Yeah.
It's for new users, I think.
Gary just put down there, I'm going to sell my EM10 Mark IV and go and get the OM5 Mark II for the weather sealing. I think, yeah, this is definitely for cameras. This is a camera for those people who had older OM System Olympus cameras, and at the OM10 level, or even the older EM5 series, and this is kind of the upgrade for them, and also aiming for people who may not have necessarily heard about the Micro Four Third cameras series. They want something small, rugged, and weather seal, and this will be I think they'll be model for it. It's definitely, I don't think it's for existing users. It's existing OM system users who already have the OM5 already, or have the OM1 or OM3. Definitely not for these people who already own these cameras, because if you really own these cameras, first of all, if you already own the OM5, you think that's not much of an upgrade for it, you know, into spec wise. If you compare it to if you own an OM1 or OM3, you think, oh, that's a downgrade. Well, it is a downgrade. It's not aiming to the same level, of course. You know, if you look at the tiers, you know, the OM1 is always going to be a flagship. You think that the OM5 will ever going to be at the same level as the OM1? They're never going to be. So you have to be realistic about what you're looking at this particular model, where it sits in the lineup.
I think as well, when it comes to updates and Mark II versions, Mark III versions, I have spent many years writing side-by-side versus articles, this camera versus that one. I've been doing this for about 10 years. I have no idea how many I've written. This is exactly how it is between versions. The most dramatic update I've written about recently would probably be the Canon EOS R5 II, which is quite a jump from the R5 for video. And possibly the Sony A9 III versus the A9 II. But most camera updates are at this kind of level, where you have to dig quite deep to see the differences and think quite hard about whether it's worth swapping. But time and time again, it's brought home to me that people don't upgrade from a Mark I to a Mark II.
No, they
These
jump a level.
upgrades are to keep the camera competitive against rival brands. They're not for people who already have invested in the brand. Not so much anyway.
Yeah, it's almost like their facelift on cars, right? You know, they update, increase the tech a little bit, they refine it a little bit just to keep it current compared to some newer cameras, and they sell you a little bit more money as well. So you know, so
and Nikon Z50 versus Nikon Z52.
Yeah,
almost the same level of change. What else can I think of? Nikon D800 versus D810, Nikon D600 versus D610. All through camera history, it's been like this.
Yeah,
You know, it's small changes that probably aren't enough to upgrade from the previous model, but are of interest to people with cameras generations back or new users. Nikon D610 over the D600, with the chief difference was it didn't get oil splattered over the sensor.
I remember that.
The biggest difference.
Yeah. So yeah, man, I guess, you know, maybe are we expecting too much these days as consumers?
I
You know,
I think so.
You know, whenever there's something like new camera come out, we just sort of expect it. Oh, it's going to be revolutionary. It's going to be so different.
I think as well we forget what we've got.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. The changes to the OM-5 II aren't big, but it's already an affordable, weatherproofed, compact camera with excellent IBIS, excellent handling, and computational photography, if that's your thing. But it was already very good.
Yeah.
We hooked on change for change's sake, I think, sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right there. I mean, many companies has done that before, and in fact continue to do so. If you look at Sony's cameras, you know, in fact they just repackaging with different shells. This is probably even worse. And so you know, it's happening around the globe, and it's not just a OM system thing. You know, it's the thing,
It's
right? You know,
not, no.
was it Lumix just refreshed one of the camera just by adding USB-C? That's even less a change.
I still don't know what the difference is between the Lumix G100 and G100D. I think that was the USB.
I think just the USB, just the USB-C.
Yeah, and that was it. Still, so nasty little camera.
Yeah. So there you go. You know, like it's not exclusive. In fact, I think the OM5 Mark II does give you even more stuff for less money. Let's put it that way. So I think it's actually a pretty good deal there. And I thought Carl actually mentioned about the battery size on the OM5 Mark II. They should have used the bigger battery. But a bigger battery means bigger body.
Yeah, and it means, you know, you don't then have the same differentiation between the cameras.
And you can look at the size of it. You know, if you want the bigger battery, you know, the OM1 battery is quite a bit thicker. And you think about the shell is not that thick. To put that size of battery in it, you need to thicken the body to be able to accept that.
You don't want a kind of internal war between the OM5, OM3 and OM1. They're not trying to beat each other. They're designed to fit into a cohesive camera range.
Yes. But I think the question is, you know, I think we mentioned it probably early in the stream that will we see an OM10 at some point? I don't know.
Definitely. And it'll be exactly the same as the EM10-4, but with USB.
USB-C.
Yeah. And a bigger grip.
Yeah, with a slightly bigger grip, and keep the popper flash though. I think people loves the popper flash.
If we must, I'll let them do that. Yeah.
And what about? I know I'm talking rubbish now. What about Pen F2? Like, you know, we're still waiting for the Pen F2.
As people have already said in the comments, you probably can't weatherproof it, and I'm pretty sure it costs quite a lot to make. I don't think OM System will do that again, which is a shame because I thought that was Olympus's best marketing campaign of all. Yeah.
Well, even Pat, I think Pat mentioned a good point as well. Like, you know, we're talking about game-changing, revolutionary. We use these terms like every time there's a new camera come out. But in fact, what he said is true as well. Smartphones the same. Smartphone now come to the point that we only get small steps of changes and upgrades. We don't see big changes these days. If you look at iPhone and Samsung's Galaxy series, they are very small changes now from generation to generations. You won't see the actual advancements unless you own a 5-6 year old phone and compared to the latest one. But if you bought the phone last year and you buy the one that's coming out this year, I think the difference is very, very small. Even though the manufacturer claimed that, oh, we are 50% faster now, the processor, this is faster, that faster. But are you going to notice it when you're actually just browsing through with web pages and looking at Netflix?
Whenever I'm buying a new Mac, I think, why does it matter to me that it's 4 times faster at 3D rendering?
Yeah.
I don't do 3D rendering.
Yeah.
So you have to balance up what you need against what you're being offered. But no, there aren't any big revolutionary changes anymore. And
No.
possibly there don't need to be. Maybe cameras have already got
Yeah.
as good as they need to get.
And just give people something to think about there, So after all we said, especially what your last point is, what's the next big thing, that you can think of in the camera world? What makes your heart pump? What you think about as a game-changing technology now? Like everyone's got their own opinion, right? I can't think of any. I'm quite happy with what I have now. I buy cameras just for the sake of buying cameras and have a little bit of fun with it. But in terms of what I need, I have everything I need, right? Like any cameras in my collection now would do a fine job for what I do. And I have job for my professional jobs. I have cameras for fun. I have cameras for videos. So like, I have everything I need. Anything that's coming out brand new now doesn't really struck the core of me. It may have a little bit more megapixel here and there. It may have this and that faster, but I don't shoot 60 frames per second for stills. I'm not that type of photographer. I'm just a portrait guy, right? 5 frames, 6 frames per second is probably as fast as I would go. Don't go faster than that. And it's just what you need, right? And like you said earlier, if you don't need certain things why bother looking at those specs in the first place, right? And that doesn't really, it's not even a relevant thing to me.
I'd be nice to see some game-changing design choices. I can't think of any technologies I would actually need that I would want to pay a lot of money for, but I would like to see camera design take a bit of a turn. I would like to see less stuff, to be honest, because with less stuff, you can concentrate more on what you actually need to do.
Less stuff. Less stuff. Here we go.
No, Jimmy. Less stuff, not worse stuff. Less stuff.
Yep. Oh, okay. Yeah, I would like to hear from you guys and what you think about, because people are always talking about new cameras, right? And let's see. I would like to see a list from you guys and say, what you think is, or what things could be the game-changing thing that for you guys, and whether it's going to be, I don't know, even higher megapixel, even better low light performances. And I know people always talk about low light stuff, but how low do you want to go low light? How many times do you really go into the dark and start photographing? And it's interesting because we've been through this for God knows 10 years now. We've been talking about ISO, we talk about megapixel, everyone talking about them for the last 10 years. What else? Is something now we're thinking that what else now? What else can we talk about? AI subject recognition, that's happened now already in the last few years. It's done.
Every limitation I find in cameras, technical limitations, only because as a reviewer, you have to find where the limitations are. They never come up in the things I shoot for myself.
Yeah.
They only come up because I'm testing the limits of performance of cameras. And these are limits that personally I would not myself get anywhere near to. You get a camera that has got native ISO up to say 51-200. You have to test it. Would you ever shoot at that? I wouldn't. The worst conditions I've been in, say, photographing the interior of a country house where they draw the curtains to stop the artifacts fading. 12-800 at most. But even then, I didn't need to, because I could have just used a slower shutter speed and trusted the IBIS, or used a faster lens. You just tend to explore the limits that you never actually need to reach. That's the danger.
I personally think that, you know, we come to the point that now we shouldn't really care about specs anymore. We should care about the design, like you said, right? You know, I think it's like, I mean, I keep using cars as a comparison, because it is true. If you look at cars, right, we've been using internal combustion engine for so many years, and now over the last decade we're looking at these electrifications coming on. That's the evolutions in the car industry, right? But the last few years, you start looking at the electric cars, they aren't that much difference, you know, apart from battery size, the motors, you know, it's all down to the design, right? You know, and design is what lure people into buying things. It's not so much about, you know, the car's dynamic. Most of us are not professional driver or racing driver. We don't know what is a car balance, you know, what's understeer, what's oversteer, you know, like we don't go to that far to test that limit, right? You know, we just drive around town, go to Tesco and Sainsbury's and come back.
I think yes, and I think it's something that occurred to me while he was saying that. He said when a technology is new, designs are radical. As the technology matures, they become incredibly conservative.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened with cameras.
Yep.
You know, when digital cameras first appear, the designs were all over the place. It's very exciting. Now they all look the same.
Yeah.
I think perhaps the same with electric cars. When electric cars first came out, there were some really weird ideas, but now they all look the same. They're all back to looking like regular hatchbacks and saloons. It's a kind of, in physics you'd call it entropy, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Everything
yes, it is.
settling back to a static, same level.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I think the next big thing now, you know, like in some way I have to give credits to Fuji for designing cameras that has that can resonate people's passions on, and I think they've done a good job in that, and that includes their marketing as well. I mean, they have done well when it comes to that sort of thing, and while I mean, if you look at the likes of Canon and Sony in particular, I personally, don't get me wrong, if you guys are Sony and Canon fans, and you might get upset, but I just think that their bodies are quite boring, and then they all look identical to me. You know, the A7, the A1, the A9, they all just look exactly the same to me. Maybe it's just slightly bigger or smaller one way or the other. And then Canon is the same thing, right? All the RF range is same thing. You know, the similar body shape. Same, you know, just bigger and smaller. You know, but the shape is the same. The Nikon. It's more or less the same too, I mean, apart from they have one ZF or ZFC. But then you look at the Z50s, Z9, they're all same.
They all hire a design consultant once every 10 years. We've got to wait for the next one now.
yeah. You know, so it's interesting to see that, you know, like Fujifilm keep pumping out different designs and for different cameras. And
I think perhaps in some way we've become obsessed with tech because cameras become so boring.
Yeah.
If they weren't so boring, maybe we'd use them to take pictures instead of comparing specs.
Yeah, so like at the moment, I'm vouching for both Fujifilm and OM system when it comes to design, because I think when it comes to the look of the cameras, you know, OM system has always been quite good at the retro styling cameras. Not so much about the OM1 series. The OM1 series has always been like a traditional DSLR kind of styling. But if you look at the OM5, the OM3, they are very gorgeously looking. You know, I think they look good. And the pen, of course, the previous pen cameras are all great looking as well. You know, I'm really hoping they remake them at some point. So that would be really cool. And Fujifilm, you know, we already discussed this. You know, they got some really cracking looking cameras. So I think they've done well when it comes to look. We haven't mentioned a couple of camera makers like Pentax and Ricoh. You know, I can't say about Ricoh. Even the latest Ricoh GR4, forthcoming GR4 model, still looks like exciting. A GR3.
It's a new model under development. May arrive this autumn. And hold your hats because it's exactly the same as the old ones. But
it might be maybe like 1,500-1,600 quid. I'm telling you, by the time it comes out.
Probably.
Yeah, I think so.
But in the meantime, you've got 4 others to choose from. Whether or not you want the highlight diffusion filter or a 2-stop ND.
Or different focal length, right?
Or 40,
yeah.
Still no viewfinder. You can't have the viewfinder. What are you thinking?
Well, you don't.
Enough complaining about that. Sorry.
Yes, we are.
Touch the nerve.
Right, I guess that probably brings to the end of today's chat. I think we had some really fun discussion. And thank you all for contributing. I've been reading some really funny comments there, and then I was, don't worry, I was reading. That's why my eyes looking at the other way. I've been reading your comments here, and I bring up as and when I think we were talking. So yeah, it's been fun. And but please don't forget to do a couple of things. First, give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already done so, and also follow us on respective social media. And also I'll have our links in the description for Rod's website. Check out his work, look at some of these reviews and everything like that. And also yeah, stay tuned for our future contents as well. And also, let us know about what you think about what we talk about today, and any sort of extra thing that we may have missed, anything you may want to contribute to our future discussion. Leave some comment down below. We're going to read them as well. And of course, just another reminder for those who have missed last week's podcast, please go back and have a look at Jean Cazel's work, because we are going to continue this series on. And Jean is our first guest. We're going to bring in more photographers coming in and bring in their work. And I'm hoping to build this really nice photographic community where people can learn from each other. You know, we learn from masters, we learn from people who really have an experience, industrial experience, award-winning photographer, and share the experiences and also the journey into photography. Hopefully that will give us all something to think about, and more than just gear and lenses and numbers, right? You know, because photography is an art, right? If you think about it as an art, we really want to get inspired from someone who's been there and be successful with it. Not just about, you know, looking at the latest and the greatest camera gear that you can buy. And although, you know, being a gear nerd and a collector, I like to do that, but at the same time, I like to get stimulated visually and creatively. Right, okay guys, and thank you very much for watching, and thank you Rod for joining. And for those who are heading to the Wales and West Photography Show, that's happening Friday, Saturday and Sunday, I believe, Rod, right? It's the weekend, right? The whole thing.
I'm going to be there Friday.
Yeah, I'll be there on Saturday. So
I don't live very far away, so
so if you guys are heading that way, and I will see you at the show, and Rod will probably say hi to you. If you see Rod, remember to give him a hug.
What?
And a kiss, and a kiss.
No.
That'll be cool. And also don't forget to check out the OM System booth and have a hands-on with the OM3 and the brand new OM-5 Mark II. Remember, hands-on is important, so you can get a feel of the cameras, whether you like it or not. And that's the best chance to do it at the show or at the shop. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all very, very soon. Bye for now.
Bye.